Welcome. This is a series on the Gospel of St. John, devoted to highlighting how his love of creation influenced his gospel. I will be your presenter. I have a master's degree in theological studies from St. Norbert's in Des Pierre, Wisconsin, and I have a passionate love for the Gospel of John. There will be credits and resources at the end of each presentation. The topic of this first presentation is the author himself, John. A book often tells us a great deal about its author. So it is with the Gospel of John. It has a very sophisticated and beautiful pattern of writing, even though the Greek is not as polished as the other Gospels. The beautiful pattern of writing that John uses is known as chiasm, or writing in chiasms, a parallel structure which helps the proclaimers to remember passages which they recite by heart. More often, it is used to simultaneously compare and contrast texts for theological advantage. It was used to demonstrate the development of thought from its first presentation to a more advanced stage. We will be discussing this more in depth as we go along. The greater portion of John's Gospel is situated in Jerusalem, which would seem to indicate that he was from Jerusalem, from a family that had intimate connections in the city with the Jewish council and with persons who worked in Pilate's place of governance. The author frequently pairs himself with Andrew and Peter in the Gospel, beginning with Andrew and John going to the River Jordan, where the Baptist was preaching and baptizing. This would seem to indicate family ties. In the first part of his Gospel and in the final scenes, John mentions certain persons: Peter, Andrew, Nathanael, Thomas, Zebedee's sons, James, and the other John, then the other two, who are most likely Andrew and himself. The fact that John's Greek is less polished than that of the other evangelists may possibly indicate that he's not writing in his first language, but in a second language. We can picture a young man, a good 10 or 12 years younger than the other major disciples, an older teenager resting on the breast of Jesus at the Last Supper, who learned to write in Greek as a second language. As a young man growing up in Jerusalem, John was highly educated in the scriptures, in those Jewish schools which focused on the stories of the Hebrew people as a source of their teaching. Due to the family ties with the family of Peter and Andrew from the north, they frequently took him with them on their religious adventures and travels. Andrew took him to the large gathering at the River Jordan, where John was baptizing. It was the first time he met Jesus. John was in the company of the older men at the multiplication of the loaves and the crossing of the sea afterwards. John the Beloved writes his gospel in his old age as a privileged eyewitness after the other men had died and when his own theological insights have fully developed. He writes using the chiastic pattern so dominant in Hebrew literature, and he makes use of it to affirm Jesus' Jewish identity as well as to show how Jesus fulfills and transcends Judaism. John's theology is profoundly creational. He interprets Jesus in terms of the creation stories of the Hebrew Scriptures, beginning his gospel with the same words used to open Genesis, in the beginning. This creation perspective is a unique feature of John's gospel, and this series will be devoted to highlighting the creationist features in John the Beloved's thinking. I have arranged this summary in a chiastic pattern to demonstrate this method. The first and last numbers are about writing. The second and sixth are about John. The third and fifth are about John's relatedness to Peter and Andrew. And the center line is about John's social and geographic identity. Here are recommended resources. And here are credits used for the resources in this particular presentation.